In the midst of the unforgiving Arctic ice, one of the greatest and most disturbing stories of human exploration remains shrouded in silence and mystery: the disappearance of the Franklin expedition. In 1845, two British ships, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror, set sail into the unknown under the command of Sir John Franklin, with the goal of finding the legendary Northwest Passage. The mission was seen as a triumph of science and navigation, but what was meant to be a historic achievement turned into one of the darkest and most controversial enigmas of all time. None of the 129 men returned. No clear message was ever left behind. Only fragments of a silent horror began to emerge years later, when rescue expeditions discovered human remains, signs of desperate abandonment, and disturbing reports of cannibalism among the crew. But what really happened in that eternal ice? Were the extreme conditions solely responsible for the tragedy, or is there something even deeper and more overlooked in the leadership decisions of the expedition? Some theories point to poor management, lead poisoning from the provisions, and even catastrophic failures in communication and preparation that turn experienced men into victims of an arrogant and unprepared system. Yet, even with the modern discoveries of the ship's wrecks, many questions remain unanswered, fueling a fog of mystery that has endured for centuries. And that is exactly what we will explore in this video until the very end, because the final revelation about the fate of the Franklin expedition may completely change the way you understand this story. But before we dive into this frozen mystery, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like, because it is extremely important for the growth of the channel and helps the YouTube algorithm bring this content to more curious people like you who enjoy real stories filled with mystery and investigation. If you would like to support the channel even further, consider leaving a super thanks. At least leave a comment telling me what surprised you the most about this story. I would really love to hear your opinion. Now get ready, because what you are about to discover may be more disturbing than any theory ever presented about the disappearance of the Franklin expedition. In the early 19th century, the world was still an incomplete puzzle. Maps contained vast blank areas, and the Arctic was seen as an almost mythical final frontier. England, at the height of its naval power, wanted one thing above all else: to find the legendary Northwest Passage, a sea route that would connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans through Canadian ice. In 1845, this ambition took shape in one of the most ambitious expeditions ever organized. Two ships that were considered modern for their time, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror, were equipped with advanced technology, onboard libraries, preserved food supplies, and even engines adapted for extreme cold. The expedition was placed under command of Sir John Franklin, an experienced explorer already regarded as a national hero. On paper, the mission seemed simple: cross the Arctic, map the route, and return with the glory of a historic discovery. But what no one knew was that this voyage would go down in history as one of the greatest disappearances ever recorded. The ships depart and are seen for the last time by European whalers in 1845. After that, absolute silence. For years, no communication reaches England. The government begins to worry, but at first it is believed that the ships may simply be trapped in the ice, waiting for the thaw. Rescue expeditions are sent. None return with clear answers. The Arctic seems to swallow every trace of the Franklin expedition. What is even stranger is that, contrary to expectations, there are no signs of an organized attempt to return. Something did not merely go wrong. Everything appears to have collapsed abruptly. Years later, the first traces begin to emerge. In Canadian territory, expeditions discover scattered human remains, abandoned camps, and signs of extreme desperation. Some bodies indicate attempts to survive under impossible conditions. Others reveal something even more disturbing: evidence consistent with cannibalism. In addition, notes left behind by the crew members themselves are found inside stone cairns. The most famous of them, the Victory Point Note, reveals a shocking piece of information. The ships had been trapped in the ice since 1846, and Franklin had died. But the note also indicates something even more unsettling. The survivors were attempting to walk southward without sufficient supplies in conditions where survival was virtually impossible. Here lies one of the most controversial parts of the story. What really killed the Franklin expedition? There is no single answer. Some researchers point to the extreme cold, which trapped the ships and prevented any escape. Others suggest an even more serious problem: lead poisoning from canned food, which may have caused mental confusion, hallucinations, and severe cognitive impairment among the crew. There's also the hypothesis of leadership errors, where delayed decisions to abandon the ship sealed everyone's fate. The result was a complete collapse. Strong, trained, and well-equipped men reduced to desperate survivors wandering across the endless ice. Even after centuries of study, the Franklin expedition remained surrounded by unanswered questions. Why did no one return? Why was there no effective rescue attempt from within the crew itself? And why were some bodies found so far from the ships? Modern theories suggest even more complex scenarios: a collective psychological collapse caused by extreme isolation, possible widespread food contamination, serious British planning failures that were concealed out of imperial pride, and even the idea that the men never had a real chance of survival from the very beginning. Every archaeological discovery adds more pieces to the puzzle, but never completes it. In modern times, the wrecks of HMS Erebus and HMS Terror were finally discovered, revealing striking details. The ships were abandoned in an organized manner, but clearly under desperate conditions. Personal belongings, scientific instruments, and even records show that the crew struggled until the very last moment against a relentless environment. But even with these discoveries, the most disturbing point remains. There were no known survivors, no final story, no complete narrative. The Franklin expedition did not end like a common tragedy. It disappeared into the silence of the Arctic itself, leaving only fragments of a story that may never be fully reconstructed. And now the question that remains is, was it just the ice or a combination of human errors, scientific failures, and desperate decisions that condemned 129 men to the most enigmatic disappearance in the history of exploration? Because even today, with all modern technology, the Franklin expedition still holds secrets that seem unwilling to be revealed.